meaning of the passage that we're going to look at today. So if there's any little children in the audience that can read those words, I'm not recommending that we use them, but they'll help us to understand the message of Jesus. Before I get into the lesson, I want to mention that our young people are at Winterfest, their youth rally, and we want to thank Dave McCarter for driving them over there. And we miss them, and let's keep them in our prayers. And because of the nature of this lesson, I think it's important for us to focus on positive messages and try to be people who give positive messages to others. I don't know how many of you like the little Dove dark chocolate candies. You buy them in a wrapper that looks like this, and inside the wrapper there's a message. And without exception, every message that I've received so far has been very positive. My wife says, they're all positive, you knuckle. No, she doesn't talk like that. Anyway, I like this one. It says, it's okay to be fabulous and flawed. All right, I can handle that. Live well, laugh often, and love much. I need to do that. Remember the simple pleasures in life. That's a good idea. You're exactly where you need to be right now. I really like that one. It reminds me of a story about Billy Graham. He was in the hospital about to have surgery, and the doctor tells him, this isn't going to be an easy procedure. There are some complications involved. We don't know exactly what the outcome will be. And Billy Graham said to the guy, I believe I'm exactly where I need to be right now. I love that. And then this is my favorite. You should charge for your great advice. Yeah. All right. All right, open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 5. We're going to be looking at this very important passage. This might be the most important sermon I ever hear. I want you to understand that. Not the most important sermon you'll ever hear, but the most important sermon I'll ever hear. And the reason for that is because this particular subject is really a challenge for me. And it's probably a challenge for you. By way of review, we've been looking at the Sermon on the Mount. And in Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 through 24, we found out there that Jesus basically says, this is doable. But he doesn't say it's easy. It's doable, but it's not easy. And the attitude that we need to take toward the Sermon on the Mount is, I have to do this because I'm a follower of Jesus. I need to do this because my life will be blessed and I'll be able to bless others. And finally, it becomes a part of who we are to the point where we're saying, I want to do this. And so Jesus gives these people a series of blessings. All kinds of people were following Jesus. All kinds of people with all kinds of baggage. And Jesus blesses them in the first 12 verses of Matthew chapter 5 to let them know that they are cared for and that they are loved. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And then Jesus makes a declaration. He pronounces that you are salt and you are light. And as a result, Jesus says, live like it, behave like it, practice it. And then in the next few verses, chapter 5, verses 17 through 20, Jesus says, don't think that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. I haven't come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have come to complete them, to fulfill them, to show you what it really means to live a righteous life. And so he says, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will have no place in the kingdom. The scribes and the Pharisees were good at things externally. They were good at wearing the right things. They were good at saying the right things. They were good at uttering the right prayers. But from the inside, Jesus says that they were like dead men's bones. They took care of washing the outside, but they did very little to change the inside. And the righteousness of Jesus is a righteousness from the heart, from the inside out. And so now Jesus proceeds to show his people what this righteousness looks like by providing 6 applications of how it works. And it's all about relationship. Relationship with God and relationship with others. How we treat other people. Today's lesson, we're going to look at anger and reconciliation from Matthew 5, 21 through 26. Those first 3 words, the title of the lesson, idiot, stupid, moron. How do those words make you feel? And those are just the ones we can use here. Have you used them? Have you used language like that toward other people? Jesus says it really has no place in the Christian life. Maybe you've used worse. In Jesus' day, the word was raka, or you fool. And they're words of contempt. They're words that put other people down, that show utter disrespect and anger toward another human being who has been made in the image of God. In one of the great novels of the 21st century by Roberto Bolaño, called 2626, he tells the horrific tale of 20 years of murders, rapes, and torturing of women. That part of the book is true, and it took 20 years before they were able to actually solve these crimes. They went on and on and on. But at one point in the book, Bolaño explains and describes a group of detectives, police officers, who are supposed to be working on the case. They're at a bar, and they're telling crude, rude, disgusting jokes about women. And Bolaño wants the reader to get the point. And the point is, murder begins with murderous thoughts. And that's what Jesus is saying in the Sermon on the Mount here in Matthew chapter 5. He says the same thing. What ends in murder begins with murderous thoughts, ugly language, lots of out-of-control anger and rage. And oh, by the way, we're also experts in sarcasm and put-downs and insults and verbal bullying tactics. We're good at destroying relationships, and we know that it's easier to destroy relationship than it is to restore relationship. It begins with disrespectful words, demeaning attitudes, and degrading communication. That's where it all starts. How do you feel when you hear these words? Idiot, stupid, dummy, moron, or others like it. You see, it's easy to tear down. It's much harder to build up. And that's why I like those little dove wrappers, because those are words that encourage and build up. And I need to hear them, and you need to hear them. Jesus begins this section of Scripture by simply saying, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit murder. Stop. How you doing in that department? I'm doing pretty good. I haven't murdered anybody yet. So I can, poke my chest out and say, wow, Lord, look how good I am. But then Jesus comes along and he steps on my toes, because he starts talking about the reality of anger. Anyone who is angry with his brother, Jesus says, is in danger of judgment. Now I'm in trouble. There's so much anger out there in our world. And there's all kinds of articles discussing anger. I came across one that was 10 pages long, talking about anger and talking about the ramifications of anger and talking about anger management. Here's just a couple quotes. When anger becomes a full-blown rage, our judgment and thinking can become impaired, and we are more likely to do and say unreasonable and irrational things. Duh. I mean, really? That's what it does, doesn't it? That's a true statement. And then the author goes on to talk about what makes people angry. And the list is really long. Everything from losing a loved one, to rudeness, to tiredness, to hunger, to pain, to injustice. I mean, you can find a reason for your anger, and it doesn't take very long at all. And then the author, since this is written by a medical journal, they talk about the physical implications and the medical implications of anger. It can cause backache and headaches and hypertension and insomnia and skin disorders, even strokes and heart attacks. And then there are emotional, psychological effects that come as a result of anger. Depression, eating disorders, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, self-injury, low self-esteem, moodiness. Wow. I think we need to listen to Jesus, because there are some horrible ramifications and results that happen as a result of the kind of anger that Jesus is discussing in this passage. A friend of mine, on his email, he has something that I always see when he writes me an email. And so I decided I'm going to copy and paste that, and I'm going to make it big, and I'm going to put it on my wall, because I need to hear this. I need to listen to it. Here's the quote. The first drawback of anger is that it destroys your inner peace. The second is that it distorts your view of reality. If you think about this and come to understand that anger is really unhelpful, that it is only destructive, you can begin to distance yourself from anger. Dalai Lama said that. I think it's good. And that's why I make copies of it. And I have it up on my wall, and anybody who wants to see it, you're welcome to have a copy of it, because it's helped me out. But anger's just everywhere. I mean, all you have to do is get in your car and go for a little drive, and either you'll get angry or somebody will get angry at you, right? I mean, just the other day I was driving east on Washington, and I came to the stoplight at Washington and Miller, and I was in the left-hand turn lane because I wanted to turn left and go north on Miller. And there's not a turn signal there, so you have to wait until the traffic is clear. So the light turned green, and I'm waiting for the oncoming traffic to go through. And there's a great big pickup truck behind me. I don't know if you're in the audience today or not, but anyway, there's this great big pickup truck behind me. And my depth perception, granted, it's not as good as it used to be, so I try to be a little more cautious. And the oncoming traffic was going through, and he felt I had room to go, so he honked at me. And it woke me up. And I thought, no, I can't go. There's still oncoming traffic coming. So I waited a little longer, and then I was able to go through, and he was right there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I was going too slow for him, even though I checked my speedometer, and I was working my way up to the speed limit. 30 miles per hour on Miller, 25 on 9th. I know why it's 25 on 9th. I got nailed there once. Anyway, so I'm making the left-hand turn, and I get through, and he's right there behind me, and he's revving up his engine because he wants to push me down the road, get me going a little faster. And I thought to myself, I have several options here. I could roll down my window and shake my fist at him and say, give him a piece of my mind I can't afford to lose. But he might be a lot bigger than me. Besides, he's got a big truck. So I didn't go for that one. Besides, Jesus doesn't want me to do that. The second one was, I know what I could do. I could slow down. Go really slow. And just really irritate him. And you're laughing because you've done that. I didn't do that one. I decided, this isn't worth it. He's probably having a bad day. He's probably, something happened. I know what I'll do. I'll turn on my turn signal, go over to the right, just stay there for a while and let this guy go by me. I really don't want to be in his path. And I did. And as soon as I did that, shoom, down the road he went. Anyway, I need a Kleenex. So, anger, it's absolutely everywhere you go. And I'm sure you can think of examples of expressions of anger that you've been guilty of or others have been guilty toward you. Randy Harris, we're using his material for this series of lessons. He wrote a book called Living Jesus. Randy Harris is a Bible, theology, church history teacher at Abilene Christian University. And every year he teaches a Sermon on the Mount in his freshman Bible class with about 250 students. He got to this passage and he was racking his brain thinking, how can I make this passage come alive in terms of what anger really looks like? So he approached a student called Joe, and he said to Joe, Joe, can you act? And Joe said, I don't think so. You mean like drama? No. I said, no, you can do this, Joe, Randy says to him. And Joe says, what do you want me to do? Here's what I want you to do. You know how I start class every session? Yeah, I know how you start class, Dr. Harris. You always tell us to turn this thing off. Okay, I'm going to go through that speech, and then at a certain point in my lesson, I want your cell phone to go off, and then after it goes off, you and I will act like we're about to get into a physical altercation. And he said, well, that won't be so hard. I'll be happy to oblige. And so he said, and Randy said, the only thing you can't do is you cannot touch me. And so the cell phone went off. You guys are really quiet. Hey, whose cell phone is that anyway? Oh, that's mine. Hi, Zeke. Thank you. So about that time when the cell phone went off, he walked over to Joe and he said, Joe, what's the matter with you? You just heard me give this speech about turning off your cell phone. I used one-syllable words. You're an athlete, and even you should be able to understand that. And Joe said sheepishly, I'm sorry, Dr. Harris. I should have turned it off. Well, next time, turn it off. What's the matter with you anyway? And Randy just kept going on and on and on. And finally, the student looked at him and said, what is your problem? And Randy said, I'll tell you what my problem is. Right now, you're my problem. And the student said, well, I can fix that. And so the student picked up all his books and started exiting the class. And Randy said, the next step you take, you better take it toward me. And so he did. He came back, and Joe was standing there in front of Randy, eyeball to eyeball, face to face, and it looked like they were about to duke it out. And then all of a sudden, Randy put his arm around Joe and said to the class, gotcha. Now, you're laughing, but the interesting thing is the students were not laughing. They were dazed and confused. There were some international students there that still don't know what to think about what just happened. And Randy asked them, why was that so believable? And he said, the reason it was so believable is because we live in a crazy world that is filled with all kinds of anger. And so when you saw it played out in that way, you said to yourself, that's real because that's the way we act a lot of the time. So what is it that ticks you off? What is it that makes your blood boil? What is it that torques your jaw? And Jesus asks us, is that something that we really need to get all bent out of shape over? Oh, there's so many times all of us have wished we hadn't overreacted to such little things. And then Jesus uses some interesting words, some unusual words in this passage. One of the words is raka. Now you're thinking to yourself, that sounds like it came right out of the bottom of your throat. It did, and it's supposed to, because it's kind of like our insult when we spit on somebody. It's a demeaning phrase that means idiot, moron, stupid. How can you be so dumb? Jesus says, you're in danger of the council of the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin was the highest Jewish council. This is serious. And then Jesus uses another word. It's the word fool. And this word, it's so bad, the word itself is so bad, folks. It's profanity. And based on the things that I read and heard, we cannot say it in this audience. And Jesus says, when you do that, you're in danger of Gehenna, of hellfire itself. And you see, these words cut at the essence of a person's worth, and that's what anger does. It chops people down, it tears them apart and spits them out. And Jesus says, this is so serious. This is so serious. How serious? If you're going to worship, stop what you're doing and go be reconciled with your brother. Our relationships are governed by respect, reconciliation, and love. Those things are more important, Jesus says, than worship. Question: what if we replace our anger with a passion for reconciliation? In this way, we become peacemakers, and we know that Jesus blesses peacemakers. What would the world look like if everybody put down their anger? A Christian needs to say to himself, I think that my relationships are more important than my time in worship. And I can't imagine going to worship until I have restored a broken relationship. Because you see, in this passage, this is what Jesus is calling us to do. And as the Sermon on the Mount progresses, as Jesus gives these other applications of what it means to live righteous lives, mark it down. Every single one of them go back to this basic one regarding anger. He's going to spend some time talking about the fact that we're not a group of people that seek revenge. Jesus is going to spend some time telling us, love your enemies too. The way you don't love your enemies, oftentimes, the way we don't love our enemies is the fact that we get so angry about everything. It's been in the news again this week. Did you notice it? Los Angeles Police Department, Officer Christopher Dorner, claims he was mistreated. He may have been, I don't know. But that mistreatment, or whatever happened, caused him to become so out of control, angry, that he shot and killed 4 innocent people. That's anger. I just checked out a book from the library. It's about this big. Don't worry, I'm not going to read it all. I just wanted to read the intro. The title of the book is From the Gulag to the Killing Fields. Guess what it's about? Yeah, it's about all the murders and all the horrible things that happened to people under totalitarian communistic rule. Why? Because of anger. Anybody ever watch the Phil Donahue show? Dr. Phil Donahue? No, not Dr. No, Dr. Phil. Excuse me. That's old school. All right. Dr. Phil. I like him. Not a big fan of Phil Donahue. But anyway, Dr. Phil. Have you ever noticed how many of the episodes deal with anger in some way, shape, or form? If it's bullying, bullying is the result of out-of-control anger. If it's an abusive parent, it's the result, again, of unresolved anger taking place in someone's life. And here's the sad thing. Those people that are bullies, those people that are abusive parents, those people that are guilty of road rage, oftentimes they've been on the receiving end of the same type of thing from parents and loved ones. It's an epidemic. And Jesus says, cut it off before it even gets started. Cut it off before it gets a chance to get started. You see, as Christians, we put a lot of emphasis on worship. But to Jesus, the relationships we have with people are more important than offering our sacrifice at the altar. Relationships trump worship. Great movie by the name of Forgiving Dr. Mengele tells a story of a Jewish woman who had suffered some of the sadistic, horrific things that happened as a result of Dr. Mengele and others like him, some of his crazy experiments during the Holocaust. And Dr. Mengele had died, but she decided that she was going to deliberately forgive him because she knew that if she didn't forgive him, he still held control of her life. But here's the strange thing, the ironic thing. When she told her friends and family members and relatives that she was determined to forgive, they thought she was crazy. And they told her, don't even try to do that. You see, unless we forgive, there can't be real reconciliation. And the truth is this. Most likely, there is someone out there each of us needs to be reconciled to. Until we practice reconciliation, the power of forgiveness is never fully present or realized. Trash talk. Trash talk is easy. It's everywhere. You could say it's part of the great American sport. It's on the field, it's on the court, it's in the gym, it's in the stadium. But it really represents, again, a lot of anger. Remember Ty Cobb? I don't know if all the stories they tell about Ty Cobb are true, but if half of them are true, that dude was one angry guy. And by his own admission at the end of his life, he had few friends, if any. Trash talk is easy. It's easy to tear down. It's easy to laugh. It's easy to scoff. It's easy to cuss cool at someone else. It's a lot harder to restore and build up. And Jesus says it's not about murder, it's about murderous thoughts, demeaning other human beings made in the image of God. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can choose to restore and to build up others. Congratulations on not murdering anybody. How are you doing on that anger thing? Is there someone you need to restore a relationship with? It's amazing that even though we are the ones who broke relationship with God because of our sin, God's the one who reached out to us in Christ in order to restore relationship. We serve a God who is the God of reconciliation. And he calls us to be people who restore and reconcile relationship. I think it's time we start an epidemic of reconciliation, because that's what God has done for us. If you know of somebody, here's the challenge for all of us, me included. If there is someone you need to restore relationship with, let's do it, because that's what Jesus would want us to do. And if you need to come to Jesus today to begin that process, we invite you to do that as Gene leads us in this song. Let's stand.